Hello, hello. ATO, how's it going? So I apologize in advance. I actually had a different title for this talk. It was called Keynote Number 4, or Talk Title to be announced. So I switched it up a little bit. So it's a strong talk title, and I know it's coming on a little strong, and it's still the morning, so we're still like settling into like, who is this we that I'm talking about? And I'm going to talk to you today. Previously at ATO, I did a talk on maintaining the maintainers. This is kind of speaking as a maintainer. So again, I'm going to be speaking as a maintainer, but this time I'm an annoyed maintainer. And the inspiration for this talk was a GitHub comment that one of my teams got, and I was like, you know what? This is the talk. This is like we're gonna highlight this. So who am I? Jono gave me a little introduction. I wanted to get into what I do, what I am. I'm a maintainer, and I spend some time in a few different communities. I'm part of the steering committee for Kubernetes, recently reelected. I'm one of the SIG release co-chairs and release engineering team leaders, which means my team is responsible for actually pushing the button that releases Kubernetes every cycle. I'm also one of the OpenSSF board members. I maintain Scorecard in OpenSSF, really cool project. If you haven't seen it, check it out. On the governing board for Open API Initiative, and one of the maintainers for DEX in the CNCF. And here are some of the things that I've done in the past. So all of this to say, so I've done chairing various SIGs and technical advisory groups that some do exist and some no longer exist. I founded Inclusive Naming Initiative. If anyone has ever written a KEP in Kubernetes, I apologize. I'm one of the co-founders of that as well as working group naming. Now, I say all of this to say that I am a maintainer, and I spend a decent amount of time maintaining projects and trying to secure the ecosystem. And I just wanted to do I didn't work with the AV team with it, on this ahead of time, but I'm going to cue some like we're going to go back to ATO 2022, where I did the maintaining the maintainers talk. And I mean, this is the summary of the talk, right? So two points. Don't lick the cookies. So often, spending time in open source, you are want to do all of the things that people feel like you need to do. You're want to, yes, absolutely, I would love to help you out with that. And every time you say that, that comes at a cost. I think with all the, I've been on a panel with some of the folks in this room. I've heard several burnout talks. Over the last few years, your mental health is a huge thing that licking the cookies can cost you, right? So choose the things that you want to work on, choose the time that you're going to invest in it, and be very deliberate about it. And second, you want to learn how to scale yourself, right? Making sure that stuff is well documented, well understood, and built around mentorship opportunities. You want to, I think one of the hardest things to do in open source is kind of get over, when you're a maintainer, get over that contributor to maintainer bump, right? How do I teach someone how to become a maintainer, right? Do we have any maintainers in the room today? All right. Do we have any aspiring maintainers in the room? Come on. All right. So this is a little flashback, and we'll get into why I wrote this talk. So this was a comment that we got on GitHub. Please consider rolling this back seriously. You're screwing up the ability of users to install anything other than version 128, which needs to be documented in the current page. This is a screw up, very simply. This was a person from the internet. And someone on my team responded, please be more kind and respectful. If that breaks something on your end, let us know in a better way, not using this type of language. Most people do this here in their free time. A very cool maintainer. So the change in question, really quick, this was around publishing packages in Kubernetes. So at the start of Kubernetes and up until very recently, we have been publishing packages and using, so if you've ever used the debs and RPMs for Kubernetes, they're hosted on Google infrastructure. So we kind of sought to move these packages over to community infrastructure, community-owned infrastructure. I opened up a proposal for this in 2019, 2020. I will note that comment was 5 days ago, right? So this is not a new proposal. We've talked about it for several moons. Lots of community feedback. We went out into end user communities. We went to vendors supporting Kubernetes. We've written blog posts. We've social media'd all the social media. We put big red banners up on the website. And still, we got that comment. So, just want to tell you, we don't owe you anything. If you recall the puppy from Nithya's talk, open source, it's free as in puppy. There are a lot of things that go into maintaining a project, and that's across people, time, money, infrastructure, training, dedication, domain expertise, corporate support, so much more. Many of these are not fungible, and they're not renewable. So every time you step to GitHub, remember that there are people, there's infrastructure, there's a lot more going on than you recognize. And there is no explicit contract that entitles you to those resources. So, what can you do as a maintainer to try to guard against some of this stuff? I had the honor of watching a bunch of wonderful talks during Open Source Summit in Bilbao recently, OSPOCon and the Community Leadership Summit, where I think one of the resounding messages was about being intentional, right? In everything that you do, right? And Joe Bita's got a quote of wearing your agenda on your sleeve, right? When you come to open source, especially if you're a corporate entity, we can smell your agenda. And when you're not honest about it, we don't like you for that. So I think as a maintainer, you also want to be intentional about what you're trying to do with your project, what you're willing to support from your project, what behaviors you're trying to engender and experience within your project. And these last two they're different and the same, but like what's existential to you? Like what do you need for that project to continue existing? And then what type of help are you willing to accept? It's not the same thing, right? You may have new contributors that are really excited to get in, jump in, start burning down the backlog that you have, and of course, you've got 300 issues in your backlog and 91 open PRs, and you could use help with that. But that contributor to maintainer spike that I was talking about, very hard to overcome. And if you have, if there is an initiative that's like, we're going to send 20 people to your project to help you out, might not be help that you're willing to accept at the time. You may not have the bandwidth to build a program that can sustain those kinds of contributions, right? And then it's a bad experience for everyone. So be intentional about all of these things. There's more. I'm not the expert, but there's some things that I thought about. Now, I'm also a consumer. Head of open source at Cisco. We spend a lot of time consuming open source. And can I get a show of hands? How many people in the audience consume open source? And if I don't see every hand up right now, because you're doing it right now. If you're on Slack, Discord, Matrix, Element, what have you, somewhere, somehow, the software that you're using is composed of open source. You're all using it. Oh, we just did this. Cool. Little ahead on the slides. We're going to get out of here early. So as a potential consumer, you may not realize that you're using it, but I promise that you are. You may not be aware of how to support the ecosystems that you're consuming. And this is the hard one. This is an even harder one, right? You may not have the corporate support or resources to actively give back to what you're consuming. So I'm going to do fancy numbers, shameless plug. Actually, it's one number, and then I'm going to point you to a report, and then we're going to get out of here, right? So OSPOs and open source software initiatives are on the rise. This is from an LF Research report, 2023, came out a few days ago. Thank you for that, so I could use it in my talk. There's a 32% increase in open source initiatives adoption between 2022 and 2023. And it's nice to see that some of these things are resonating with my OSPO. Nithya, I'm sure you'll feel the same, but across security, interoperability, process automation, and being able to position companies around leading edge technologies like AI. It's all happening, and it's all happening because of open source. It's all happening because we're building towards openness, right? So if you're wondering how to catalyze that support for open source projects within your companies, you should look at forming an OSPO. You should talk to people who have formed OSPOs. We've got several in the room. And if you want to talk a little bit more, you can stay in touch with me. It is whois.augie.dev. And if you're looking to understand how we use open source at Cisco, we're going to be at booth 38 and 39. And kind of hanging around, we've got some talks today around open telemetry and a few other things. So yeah, check it out. Thank you for your time.